Peace. Mao. Mao is a system of law that I want, like, instead of a police state. I got a lot of stuff to write up. I guess that I'm just gonna go through some ideas and then try and remember stuff that I want to write about. Mao is a system of law that could possibly replace a police state. I think something's got to replace a police state, so I think there's got to be a solution. Um, Mao is evidence-based Sharia with a particular interest in prevention. So we're not going to see laws like someone does a bad thing and then a bad thing has been done and they need to be punished, but no one wants any bad things to happen. So some people who maybe they would usually be police, but in this system, they're same kind of upstanding people who instead want to work for a different system. And the new system is called Mao. There's two main parts here where there's a preemptive like intervention and post-fact intervention. The reason they're both called intervention is because it's a huge deal for anyone to get involved in anyone else's personal stuff. Even if I hit you, even if you're my girlfriend, and then you're the state and you come in and you want to hit me or put me in prison, or chase me down or whatever, it's a huge deal. It might be right, but for something to become a matter for the courts is something that under our current paradigm is really, really messed up. That right now in the British law, it's the jury who decide whether or not this is a matter for the court. That the system has to arrest someone first, make a charge, detain them first, put them in shitty clothes, take them to the court, and then the ultimate question that the jury are asked, and no one but the jury, is this a case where this law applies? If so, the judge will judge between like the fine details of what's stipulated within this law about what they can do. But it's so wrong. The jury are the least informed, and they've actually got to make an objective decision about like how well these things map to the evidence that they have. So you don't need a committee to make that objective decision. The only like skill you could want for the people making that decision are that they know the law very well. But these are exactly the laymen who are called in. And obviously there's a lot of problems that, you know, juries have never proven their worth in not being persecutory. Juries have historically been sending more minorities to jail than anyone else. And it seems like a really cruel trick to me that whether or not this is a crime is decided by the jury reading a law that they don't really know. And what an offer to make people. Like, I saw someone on the internet say, "Oh, this new law on the internet say, oh, this new law in Finland that's going to stop dick pics being sent." Good. I sometimes get sent pictures by girls who are ugly, and I would like them in prison. No, you wouldn't. They're so much more productive when they're not in prison, and when they come out of prison, they're going to be sadder and just like you don't want them going to prison. But if you just give someone a choice, hey, do you want someone to have it worse than you? Deciding on the day, maybe. And if it's this day where you've been legally obliged to go to this court where there's a lot of people fucking around and there's this guy who's especially your honor and, oh, maybe in that kind of situation it would seem rational. And there's a bunch of you, yeah, let's throw him into jail. That's the main question they ask, and it's not really to do with the law. They're the least prepared. So we start with this idea that intervention is a big deal, that if you and I have a problem and then an infinitely armed state gets involved, that's always an escalation. So I want this intervention to happen before anything bad happens, if we're trying to prevent bad stuff. Which means that for all the resources that we spend on imprisoning people, surveilling people, paying the very expensive people to make the laws about whom to imprison, all of this stuff. Pre-conflict Mao is you go to this office, you speak to trustworthy people who have the same kind of resources as police, and you say, I've got a problem with this person, or I've got this problem that I don't have this thing that I really want. Our society is so rich and full, and people's needs are actually pretty small. I think a lot of the time you'd just be able to sort it out there and then. If it was something as simple as like they really wanted a PlayStation 4 and there was a warehouse full of PlayStation 4s, and just give them one. It's not the society that we have at the moment, but it's the society we could have if we didn't waste so much money on stuff that we really must agree isn't good, like war. In the cases where this doesn't sort it out, and that leaves obvious what kind of functions you need for, I can't remember what it's called, pre something. You want people with like various perspectives. I think you want like the nicest possible and most flexible. Where are we going to meet up to have this conversation? And in both cases, I think you want the fewest people around who aren't involved with what's happening. You want either of them to be able to sort of bring their peers with them and sit side by side and not be isolated in this like special seat where someone who's even specialer looks down on them. And no, it's macabre. But like if I did something against you, and I can come maybe with my family and your family or whatever, and I think it's important that we be able to sit without being separated by the state and kind of made into adversaries by the role play. We could be looking mutually for resolution. Now, if there is a case where something has bad happened, that's okay. What do we do then? If we're interested in making sure it doesn't happen again, we've got two parties that we make sure that they're okay. Just the person who did the crime or the bad thing and the person who was the victim. It seems to me the most obvious question you ask is, why did you do that? If it was so clearly bad that it requires this kind of intervention, and this kind of intervention is more serious because sometimes you're going to have to make it compulsory that someone would go and just acknowledge the fact that someone has a criticism against them. And that's where it starts. But if they have really done something bad and maybe they don't want to face up to it, then you've got to think about, well, moving people's bodies without their consent. As soon as you have that, you don't have a culture that really considers consent holy. You have a culture that thinks consent is a good idea, except for when it comes to the regulators. Well, I want a society that's based on consent because that seems good. Can we get it? I know that at post-fact mediation, it is mediation, that is the one. Preemptive mediation and post-fact mediation. Like, I have no idea why it's called MOW, but I think it's spelled MOW. It's just a replacement for law. Whatever law was, well, law. Well, MOW is a replacement. Post-fact mediation is that something has happened or something has purportedly happened, and now you want two people to get together and make some kind of resolution. The way this has worked for most of history, everywhere, has been systems that aren't police states. A lot of the time, Sharia has worked, which is, if I've got a problem with you, well, we know all the same people because that's how it was in the past. And there's probably someone that we both trust as an elder or something who's wise and they know all the rulings and they can decide. There's a mutuality to it that this person is acting in the interest of society and in the interest of these two people. And it's only about these two people, but it's for the good of society that we would resolve it. I feel like if ever you write a law and it says you have to punish this person this much when this thing happens, you're always going to overshoot it. That there's always going to be times where the thing that you described can actually be perfectly fine. I had this weird image this morning about like, well, if there was going to be a nuclear bomb fired by the UK government onto anywhere, say we compare like, just imagine that it would have the same effect as Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Like 40,000 civilians being evaporated. Is it moral for me to go blow up Westminster Palace before that's an option? Because they're threatening it, and they force everyone to pay for it year on year. There's about 600 people I would need to kill for there to be no government of the UK. And I've watched them be complicit in only in the last 20 years. These conflicts which have taken, seems like a couple of million civilians for Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria alone. They're all above 500,000. It's huge. What do we do about it? Pay them tomorrow? Vote for them tomorrow? Post-fact mediation, if something did go wrong already, doing morally dodgy things to prevent morally dodgy things is morally dodgy. Post-fact mediation, I know that for whatever punishment that you could be attributed, it's not going to be the same for the different people if I say go stay in a prison for a year or whatever. I think there should be like a number of points, and the person who is accused and charged gets to choose how their points are spent in like making good the debt. So the minimal way, the tidiest way, is to make sure that the other party, the victim party, is happy with what happened from the resolution. If you can do that in a way that, well, okay, so if the other party agrees that it's finished at any point, then it's finished. No sending someone to prison whilst the person who is harmed, is good for them to forgive. There's no trouble at all, and that person who did the bad thing, we're saying, has now been shown a really, really good example, which isn't what they get if they go to prison. I know that treating people with respect matter and that their decisions matter. They're going to be better people. They're going to do better things. If you tell someone that their actions don't matter, and if you show someone that their actions don't matter repeatedly, I think it's then where you get everything from school shootings to just like random muggings, that people who don't rationally, a lot of the time, don't have a sense that what they do has consequences, or the only thing they can do that has consequences is something that isn't allowed because they're so belittled by an architecture around them. We can have a lot of sympathy for the person who does something bad, especially in a nice society, because it's irrational, and then you're like, well, that's got to be some kind of affliction that's not good for you. If we can have post-fact mediation where I killed someone, I sit down with their family and say, how can we make this good? Having seen like the families of people who have been killed on TV, and they're just like, oh, it's so awful, and we'll never. And if only it doesn't seem like they want, Boris Johnson to go put them in a cage. They never say that. Oh, why can't? Oh, if only this person were put in a cage. It seems like a lot more could be done for the family by just creating a nice situation where they can talk to the person, talk to me, and see how aggrieved I am. Not, I'm trying to save my life, I'm trying to stop this new harm that's just come up, that I might be put in a cage or killed, where I'm basically forced to lie and be a shitbag. But if I've killed someone and I can go speak to their family and try make a resolution that's based around their family and the kind of effective victims in this situation, good. It doesn't need to be about your honor. There's nothing honorable in it. What kind of resolutions could we come to in the case of murder? And then we're like, well, most of the laws, they're less serious than murder. If you did that, if you did all you could do to try and make good of that situation, the only thing that would be left, really, I think, is for the family to forgive. They don't gain anything by any kind of punishment. Obviously, you can't force people to forgive, because that would just be not involving their moral agency. So I think that we want to empower the victims with quite a lot of choice, and the choice is this person going to have something bad happen to them, or not? And it's going to be up to a certain amount of badness per crime that can be validated with a certain amount of evidence. It takes more evidence to... Is evidence a grey scale? Is grey evidence ever good enough? I could say that it requires more evidence to charge for murder than for pickpocketing. A lot of this is just based on resource needs. Most of the crime isn't people killing each other, and when they do, there's usually amazing reasons for that. Sometimes they kill strangers, and there's amazing societal reasons for that. But like, most of the crimes that people are in prison for aren't most of the things that cause problems in society. Dealing drugs and stealing stuff from infinitely rich corporations, or relatively infinitely rich corporations. We don't really have a crime problem so much as we have a law problem. What else? Well, I want the family to have a choice. And it needs to be then that they have a choice of like consequence or no consequence. And this is a huge choice for them to make. And for the rest of their lives, like, either way, they'll have done it. And in terms of how do you help someone who's been bereaved by a murderer, I think there's as much as you can give to them. We'll worry about what the murderer does next. If we just forgave them, what does that do? Does that create the kind of society, if a murderer can be forgiven, where things are terrible? I don't really want to explore that. No. No, it doesn't. Why would it be? Is there any reason to think there would? Okay, for most of the past, I guess most of the murders have gone unsolved. Of the murders that we today recognize, oh, there was a murder there, still about half go unsolved. So it's not like this big expensive apparatus of imprisoning murderers in very ritualistic ways is what's keeping anyone from not being murdered. I know if I want to murder, I've got about a 50% chance of getting away with it, even if I'm not thinking about it. I just do the average murder. So when we find a murderer and then we bring them to the situation and have like a group acknowledgement and go over it, and you want a therapist there, you want someone who's good with ethics there, whatever. You can choose this case by case, and what are the punishments? What are the points for? I feel like if I killed someone, the victim's family should be able to ascribe to me some kind of debt that I have to pay off. Like, I don't mind people enforcing repercussions on me for my actions, so long as the society isn't so shitty that, you know, I don't really have a choice. But community service, and I like the idea that you could have, you know, spend some of your points with community service, spend some of your points with prison. I don't think I want any prisons that I've been. It's not a very like healthy environment. I know lots of people who started taking hard drugs in prisons because it's the only fun thing to do. I know that they don't have toilet seats in prisons, and it's like, that's not really about rehabilitation, then, is it? It's gross. People are products of their culture. You don't have anything to learn from other than what's surrounding you, and we don't have any moment where we're not learning and we're conscious. So putting all, I'm not going to say the worst of society, but the most badly treated in society, the people in prisons, they're way above the people who are in mental health prisons, who it seems like it's like that for immigration detention centers. There's some people who don't find this one scarring. Fucking hell. Good morning, fascism. Points. Right. Does it matter if I do a crime, I've got some points to pay off. I've got some skill, maybe. Can that help? Does that mean that I should be able to? I don't think it should mean that, you know, if I can do something incredibly useful with my community service, that shouldn't get me off easier. No. But like relative to how difficult it is, I don't mind lashings. That's worth trying, at least, as one of the options. I did a bad thing. Okay, I can be lashed 50 times. It won't be nice. If you think it's the easy option, even better. You'll never make that mistake again. And it gets it all out of the way. No more crime, no more punishment. It's done. If the victim's family wanted the satisfaction of seeing the other person suffer, that's not in a fucking Pentonville prison with its sex offenders and transgendered women section, its lack of toilet seats, and its PlayStations and deliveries and things. No. Someone murders my child and then goes hangs out with a load of boys where they get hard drugs, they do gay things, they get kind of they get PlayStations and no toilet seats. Gross. And that's one of the harsher prisons. Bentonville has a pretty bad reputation, whereas other places, oh yeah, they're easy, they're comfy. The lashings I'm okay with. Prisons, not so much. I want all of the prisons immediately to just be open houses where, like, they've got beds, they've got food. Keep that going. We could probably take a load of refugees and say, look, you've got this big house. Obviously, leave the doors open, but fire a lot of the staff. Just none of the staff when I went were doing anything. Just literally holding weapons whilst imprisoned people were doing the work without any employment rights. What else? You can get lashings, you can do community service, you know, just some way to, it's mostly symbolic to pay off the debt. The real thing is done, the crime is done. You just need a way for people to get over it. I think the most significant thing is to give the victims the choice about, like, is it done yet? And then the choice is predicated on there are the nasty solutions. And Death penalty, whoever gets to choose. Currently, the British government choose that some people get to die without calling them guilty of anything. That's not really applicable. That just needs to end. Used to all of this stuff whilst everything is equally amazing when we're children. How does this work? How does this work? How does this work? Every child knows by the time they go to school that there are some people with truncheons who can put you in a cage if you're bad, but really more often that, I mean, it definitely predicts maps to race, but it doesn't necessarily map to bad. Definitely maps to socioeconomic situation. Doesn't necessarily map to bad. It's horrible to find that out later. You're like, oh. Especially raised atheist, I had no other conception of good and bad other than like what the state does or subjectivity. Fuck you. Hurts. I haven't got to my own ethic about whether I think the people who are responsible for this need to be beheaded for all of history, to just go like, that's really where the line is. Don't hold weapons and try and get people to do what you want because your plan isn't good enough. So what are these points? Community service, a percentage of wealth, wherever that makes sense. Seems good. Seems really fair. What it would mean is occasionally, like, the poor I don't think we're going to have poor people. We so don't need poor people. We've got too much stuff to have poor people. We don't have a resource problem. We have a law problem. Plenty of resources. Evil is the only legality at this moment. If I want to act morally, I got to act outside the system. Because I can't act morally and keep on paying for these armies. Can't act morally and keep on paying for the police to carry more and more weapons, pay less and less attention to the law, and be more and more everywhere. I can't act morally whilst acting within this system. I can act morally parallel to the system or against the system. I know which one seems more exciting. What does parallel to the system? If I can go parallel and grow, then that's acting in contrary to the system without just saying, like, taking pot shots at government buildings. Am I the only one who fantasizes about this? You gotta have a plan, and you gotta have a backup plan. I think probably, okay, what does it look like to try and fight this state head on? I mean, I, by myself, can make a very limited amount of mess, and that's not going to do a thing. Acting directly against this state would be to just write a list of, here's all the things that we heard we didn't like when they were happening, then new bad things happened the next day, and kind of made yesterday's ones just a little bit easier by being quieter. But really, here is what the UK government has done in the last, that would be the case. And then you go, I would say 100 years. I want to mark it from 101 years now, from Versailles, from the mandatization of Palestine. Say everything before then relatively inconsequential to me, and there's no shortage since then. What would that look like? A document that just says, here's all the bad things and here's why it's absolutely unjustifiable. That would be an amazing text. Is there anything like it? No. Is there any other enemy that needs calling out? Depends who I choose, but no. Like, statism, I agree with Nietzsche. It's the state. Bad. There's this, like, the Christians have had a really hard time, I think, in the last 100 years, that when capitalist, consumerist, secularism stuff went into overdrive on trying to replace the existing culture with its own, I see this like anti-religious kick within the past century of pop stuff in the West. But when I say anti-religious, particularly anti-Christian, I think that, well, obviously the status of being a Christian doesn't carry the same weight as it did 100 years ago. I also think that Christianity in particular, it's the biggest religion in the world. It's also the, I don't know if this is the word, the most effusive, that Christianity kind of maps to Jesus, peace be upon him. There's more interpretations of Christianity than there are of anything else. All the Muslims, we have one creed. We believe there is one God and Muhammad is his messenger. Peace and blessings be upon him. You can't find two Muslims who don't agree on that. I mean, you can't find a Muslim who doesn't agree on that. It's categoric, and it's how this particular teaching was taught. We say it's compatible with Christianity, essentially the same thing, taught in completely different words, and maybe, well, we are a different people for a different trajectory, and of course they're all going to meet up by the last day. I see that there's a lot of Christians throughout the part of the world that's really fucked up, that doesn't have a culture, who have a lot to gain from, obviously, the demolition of the secular state. If there were on Earth 5/7 of people who were all Christian, Muslims, or Jews, we would be a massive majority, and we'd probably all be able to agree to live on the 10 Commandments. All the secular people have been taught that they depend on their safety for the people who are creating all the laws and perpetuating crime. So we necessarily see it in different ways, you know. Christian probably looks at Christ being crucified and thinks, that wasn't good. Like, as a people around, you don't look at that story and think, yeah, jury system. You don't look at that system and think, yeah, police state and courts, and he was innocent. He was murdered. I don't see how you can get from that gospel to a police state and going, yeah, we need a police state. But all the people who have been raised without Christianity have been raised to believe that the police state is what keeps them safe. Can they have their own little police state where, like, we're as liberal as the Islamic State, where if you're Christian, you get to live by Christian rules. If you're Jew, you get to live by Jew rules. If you're Muslim, you get to live by Muslim rules. And if you're a secularist, you get to live in your own little city that has a police system in it. People would all leave. People would be like, I just want to be in the 10 Commandments zone. But we've already said that the 10 Commandments doesn't prohibit people making a group and making a police state. Does it? Well, I mean, you're not supposed to take another god but God if you're following the 10 Commandments. Secular people don't consider that the people they consider their overlords are effectively gods to them. When they need the problem solved, oh, see these protests outside Westminster Palace. They say, you're not doing anything and you're not capable, so listen to us. It's idolatry. Every picture of idolatry within the books is the same picture. You're talking to stones, they don't speak back to you, they can't harm you or help you. What do we do about secularism? We don't need a better, more sophisticated law. We need people to stop with the weapons and the taxes, the doing things they don't agree with and contributing to things that they don't agree with, and then going, we're all doing it, and look how big this thing we don't agree with is now. What the hell can we do about your secularism? Preach. Is that it? I mean, it seems great. What am I going to preach? Ma'un, liberality. Preach that there is a system that's more liberal. Preach Sharia. Jesus said, I am Sharia, which, for anyone who was taught to be afraid of Sharia, sorry that happened to you, that's awful. Hashtag me too for a bit. I guess. What's the alternative to the secular state? Something on the internet. I've designed that. Why can't it work? Because the internet isn't good enough. We've got a better internet. Ooh, Mao. Are we just piling up to see which bits we have? What could make a document? Okay, well, better internet voting system. Mao. Math. Model theory. Not cosmology. Cosmology. I don't have enough cosmology to make a cosmology. I've got bits. You can put the bits in a thing. When you're putting the bits down, they'll add up to a thing. You'll see where the gaps are. Yeah. Fuck, so that would be a document. I mean, last night it came out of my fingers. There's going to be a new book of truth for everyone. God's not being ambiguous. That's so weird for me, but also good. Well, do I need to plan then, or isn't God going to reveal stuff that I can't hasten, or that's the last day you can't hasten? Oh yeah. But that's the last day of this particular adventure, which I certainly can. Then acknowledgements about just how, what the UN, what the League of Nations, what Westminster has done in the past 100 years, 101 years. The bits I haven't worked out is the most fun bit. Fuck it. We need an Islamic State, or we need the kind of society, the kind of world society where some people are allowed to live in a way that the West doesn't necessarily approve of, because the West doesn't agree with itself. So you can't ban Islamic states from happening anywhere in the world. And actually, guess what? Islamic states, they can exist anywhere. So we don't need borders. We've got no idea of a border. We're all from one people, don't be racist, said our Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. At his last sermon, at a really important occasion, we don't have borders, so this is the Caliphate of Aisha. I'll probably change the name. Really? Why? That's awesome. Like, just Aishaic Caliphate has been way catchier in my head for the past few years of secretly planning a caliphate. Okay, well then you've got a caliphate. Where did you establish it? In my room. Well, in the Alamin, in the universe, there is one of these. And if people want to be a citizen of my caliphate, they can be. Do we have a caliph? Can God be the caliph? I'll be a Khalifa as vice Khalif. Of course I will be. I'm not fucking around. Okay, so I've got an independent state. We're gonna annex the UK real quick. Because the only way to beat colonialism is to go over the top of colonialism. This is progress. I don't want to be the Queen of England for sure, because then I've got to have borders and acknowledge borders. But I can just have a caliphate, which is a geopolitical entity that extends to the bounds of the universe by opt-in inclusion. Now, if I can make there any benefits for being a member of the Aisha Caliphate, this would be a good thing. If you do, I love and trust you. You get to take citizenship into your own hands and just be a citizen of a thing that you want to be a citizen of. What an imaginary idea I had several years ago, but only mentioned now. No, right. I don't need to make up why it's awesome to be part of a caliphate, because God made up why it's awesome to be part of a caliphate. Like, nobody pays taxes until they own at least like 6 camels. I can't remember it exactly. This side isn't my forte. I'm going to go read, because God has all the answers. I'm going to read, I'm going to find out what's the most awesome caliphate you could ever imagine, and be allowed to have one. I'm on the island that I was born. Has got to count for something in, whoever started this country, they did it in exactly the same situation as I did. They were on this country, they were born here, they decided they needed a new country. I decided I need a new country, and it's got to be a caliphate because it's near enough the end of the world. She's been talking about prophecy and stuff, and I don't see a better system. It's been tried and tested. What's great about a caliphate? Everyone asks. Polynormativity, that you can live by your own laws within one coherent structure. Takes a little bit of sorting out, but it works. It means that the big question variable mark is, who are these secular people? And it's the secular people who in general are like really into identity politics, which could really help because we need them to have a different identity, and perhaps not this big one that they don't get to really participate in, but still if used as weapons over nasty cause and effect channels. Get them out, get them out. Make your own little cultures, join our caliphate. Seems good. That would be a really, really good plan. If you're a member of my caliphate, I really don't want any other people saying, well, our law has to apply to you. I take massive issue with that. I'm not imposing my law on anyone else. Currently, everyone who's part of Aisha Caliphate smokes, so it could effectively be the law that everyone smokes. I don't know how the legal system works yet. We've got a sketch. But I can't make everyone smoke when they're not part of my caliphate. So Elizabeth Windsor, who's like, she's trying to do the same thing as me, but not as well. She's trying to be a queen, I guess, or not. Either way, she doesn't get to impose her laws on any of my, we're not going to call them loyal subjects, but people who are members of my state, your state doesn't get to touch them. Oh, that would be an amazing international law so that you don't keep on invading Muslims, sort of not noticing. Don't touch people from other people's states. This is a really good idea because within the West, which is messy and has taken in a lot of different cultural ideas, and all of these different cultural ideas are here, and they're going to make new combinations that are going to be great. Whilst it's a mess, it's not so great. Whilst it's a mess, I don't want anyone to touch me at all unless they've asked, in any situation. If they do, I want the right to hit them. Full force in their face, because it's happened so many times and I've had to not hit them. So I don't want anyone to touch me at all. Other people don't want that norm. So if I can have people from a different culture not touch me, I'd be really happy. Within their own culture, they can touch people and know that that's their culture. In my culture, don't touch me. When you're doing that, you kind of don't need everyone to be in just one culture at a time. That's not an Islamic state. That's something after. or like built on top of the same idea. A model extension. So what would that look like? Because I might want to live by that "don't touch me" law, and also the law that most of the touchy people like and the non-touchy people don't like. Is there a way that I can just sort of say, here's my operating system of different etiquettes? I don't think it's going to be very many. Like, don't touch other people and don't touch their stuff. What crimes can you commit then? Don't hack into their accounts. The 3 principles. What am I thinking about? Law, 3 principles. Oh, we're not all the same. We've got all the same needs. That's a universal. We should start there. We all need food, air, space, or like a reasonable expectation that no one's going to come and just stamp on our bananas. I know, like, if we tried to establish the Constitution of Medina right now, who are the Jews, Muslims, and Christians? That question has become a lot more complicated in the last 1,400 years. Muslims are definitely the ones who say La ilaha illallah. And when Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, was doing this, like, that was enough for him to consider you a Muslim. The thing that God has made happen with respect to Abu Talib, it shows how big of a difference it makes saying La ilaha illallah or not for Muslim inclusion, group identity. That's how it works. Because he was someone that you'd really love if they were part of this team, but they just refused to say it up until their deathbed. And it's like, wow, that was a disbeliever then. Or the kafir, the categorically not Muslim person with the same deeds. If they had said La ilaha illallah at the end, they were never going to, but if they had, they would have been a Muslim. They would have got to be within the Muslim laws of what would later be a caliphate. Yeah. See, if I'm sitting with the Quran and a Hadith, and I write, what do you have to do to be like totally okay in the eyes of God and in the eyes of Islam? It's very, very easy. The Quran prohibits 2 things. With outright prohibitions. Murder isn't one of them. Murder says if you kill someone, you owe their family something. It is better for their family to forgive. No prohibition at all. Eat is to find foods that have been made lawful for you. All that we have prohibited, or all that has been prohibited to you is the flesh of swine and carrion, except if you're on a journey, or if you intend no sin by it. So, out of 2 prohibitions in the Quran, one is very weak. Don't eat these things unless the other one is really, really strong. And if you can do these 2 things, then you're the perfect Quranist, as far as I can see. No, there's way more that you can aspire to. But you've never broken any of the rules of the Quran, and it's what God is asking you to stay away from, if you believe in the Quran. One of them, don't eat pork, don't eat dead stuff that you find just lying on the ground. The don't eat pork thing is explicitly to do with Jacob, peace and blessings be upon him, who is Israel, the father of Joseph, of the Technicolor Dreamcoat, peace and blessings be upon him, and the 12 tribes. Jacob specifically prescribed from himself eating pork. He said, I'm not going to eat pork. That's why we don't eat pork. Not that God came in and said, you don't eat pork, therefore everyone else don't eat pork. Not like that. Jacob gave up eating pork by himself. We don't know if there were any other animals to eat around. He might have been going vegetarian by not eating the little boars, but we don't know this. He certainly said, I'm not going to eat boar. And so the reason we don't eat pork is tradition, and so we've all got something in common to that one person who, he's great. He's really, really amazing. If you need like a favorite prophet who isn't one of the most obvious ones, he's a good candidate. The other prohibition in the Quran, it's completely the opposite. It's way, way, way harder. And it comes specifically from God. It's the type of thing that only God could think of, I think. What's the other thing the Quran prohibits? It says, don't do this thing. I can't wait for answers. If it's Ramadan and you're staying in the masjid for the purpose of ritual purification, like a lot of the time in the last 10 days of Ramadan, if you're making itikaf, you go stay inside the masjid and you don't leave. People bring a little bit of food for you, but you're fasting anyway, and you just stay in the masjid. That's itikaf, ritual purification. It uses this word in the Quran. Whilst it's Ramadan and it's the evening and you're there for the intention of itikaf, don't have sex. Do not transgress the bounds of God. In the masjid during Ramadan, in the evening, whilst your intention is specifically itikaf, under those conditions, do not have sex in the masjid. Do not transgress the bounds of God. It's this really emphatic statement. How much control do you think God wants over you? But it's still kind of surprising to reach this conclusion that there's two prohibitions in the Quran, a soft one and a very hard one. The soft one, don't eat pork or carry on unless you're on a journey or you just don't intend sin by it. And then the other one, do not transgress the bounds of God. Whilst you're in the masjid, stay in there for ritual purity, and it's the evening, and it's Ramadan, don't have sex then. It's perfect. If I wanted to make some laws, I see all the people, oh, they love laws. Maybe one law wouldn't convince them that it's a law. So 2 laws seems a pretty good minimal law. You got to prohibit stuff. Are they going to listen? I swear. God knows my heart. I've seen this happen. I've seen the second thing happen. I didn't see it with my eyes. I saw people go into the masjid. I saw them in the masjid looking out the window. I didn't see what happened, but I know a place where this has happened during Ramadan in the evening, whilst people, they weren't really there with the intention of itikaf, but they were like on holiday, which, what's your intention when you go on holiday? You go to another place, and it's pretty similar to the idea of itikaf. I can't believe that I live in the decade, the century where such thing could even be imagined, that like literally someone's going to break that rule, and it's another indicator that we're near the end of time. That just how could people conceive of having sex in a masjid? What needed to happen first in this case was that the guy who owns the masjid just put a flat in the women's section. It's not just the state I have a problem with. We'll get it better. It's really not the problems that are the solutions at this point anyway. Right, so liberality, polynormativity, it seems like things that the West really want, which the police state doesn't offer, but the Islamic State offers. What can I do about that? I happen to have information. Well, I could make videos talking about potential and options and things. I don't really see how that's going to sublimate into there not being a police state anymore, but it is only ideas that need to be moved around. Do we give up on text? Jesus, peace and blessings be upon him, he could write, but he didn't write. He did write. He's written one sentence that's recorded in history. Jesus wrote one sentence. Imagine what he could have written. Maybe what comes later, if anyone's interested in getting the Injil. We were supposed to do cause and effect of the soul today. We were supposed to do, there's ideas, there's emotions. Okay, so what idea you have in a certain context is going to be predicated by your context, but also in like your emotion, how you feel at that moment. Out of all the stuff, you know, which rational bit do you get? We call that your emotion that chooses that. Your emotion. What emotion are you going to feel in a certain context then? Well, that's to do with what I've called virtues, that like you can practice those, like patience is a virtue. And if I've practiced a load of patience, then what my emotion is going to be in a certain situation is going to be, I've got swole patience, I'm probably going to be patient then. What affects our virtues? Really recent and weird. Well, just, I wasn't expecting to get a new thing on this little construct. Values. Everyone has values, and the values, particularly, like, they are, what quantities are there? So for me, like, black is a value. I'm not a very good one. I keep on picking out about, because people are racist about it, and it's not a thing. There aren't black people. Right, so values is on what terms do you predicate? No, values is how you connect up the ideas to say, this is a value based on ideas. I was going into explaining that values were like the particles that we acknowledge that these things exist, therefore we have a virtue about them. No, there's a bit in the middle that is ideas, emotions, virtues, ethics, and values. So what is there in the world? We have a value about it. What is there in the world is what we call values for some reason, but that doesn't make much sense. Predicates. What do we think there is and how it works? Okay, so then we will make an ethic. An ethic prescribes like a general how we're going to be, which is going to prescribe our virtues, which are meta emotions. That's a synonym for meta emotion, but I think because we're doing meta, virtues. So our ethic is going to put us in situations which make us practice a virtue, a thing like patience, or even a thing like anger, or whatever. It's going to, no, maybe it's a bit more complicated than that. We don't always get to choose what thing we're growing in and being developed in. We don't get to choose really what we're learning, but we can choose like how likely we are to learn and what sort of stuff we could even possibly learn by being in different contexts. still, there is this stacking of, well, there's somewhat a stacking. I feel ideas are predicated upon emotions, are predicated upon what you practice. Virtues. I feel like that's all really solid. And the other day I thought, wait, where do we get our... What's going to make me sit and meditate and try and raise my patience? Or be the type of person who is going to be angry a lot of the time and, you know, sort of foster your capacity for anger and your defaultness to anger. I think that's a thing. I think that's how they stack up. But then these virtues are just lived. Where do I get them from? It's from my environment. So what was I sticking on the top? Values are a thing that the society makes up, the environment makes up, and by the time you get to values, individual agency isn't like individual agency for ideas. I can freely think up whatever ideas I want, but to think up whatever values I want, I really, most of the time, need to refer to my culture, or always need to refer to my culture. If I want to make up my own values, I have to be a culture of one person, which, thank God. But, well, that's it. The secular people suck because they don't have any autonomy. They keep on contributing to a system that doesn't do any good, and they know it. If they had more autonomy, they wouldn't keep putting weapons in the pile for their overlords to go grab. Autonomy is what I wish for the people. Autonomy is what I think I can best try and help towards. Now, where does autonomy come into this? God helps with autonomy. Independent thinking helps with autonomy. Smashing people's idols helps with independent thinking. I've got maths that does that. I've got maths. Maths. Let's maths then. I don't want a maths on video. Not now. I don't want to do maths immediately. I want to write it with the pen. After a cigarette. If there is really a person who watches, you're one person watching this. I'm so touched. I don't know any other, like, more specific than that. I'm going to be world famous soon, no matter what I do, because I did some maths that you can check in advance. Oh, it's some good new maths, and a big chunk of new maths. I'm not really enthused about the attention that I'm going to get, but I know that I'm going to get a lot of platform, and basically the best thing that any of us could ask for is platform. Maybe it's, I don't know. I've been worried for years about the platform that I'm going to get, and like, I certainly don't want to be seen as an academic. I don't want my effect to be like, oh, maths nerds have something more to study. It's never been about that. It's never coming to that conclusion. What am I doing? Well, I'm going to speak to the whole world in a moment, so I just need to know what I'm going to say. That's terrifying. But at least we're not scared that we're crazy anymore. That's a function of new proofs that just came in a month. And before that, oh jeez. How's your life? I mean, you can talk in two directions. We're going to make a new culture. We're going to make a new culture out of new formats. This is a pretty new format. If all the people can speak, they will drown out the sound of the speakers. Once the poor unite, the rich are surrounded. They'll go peacefully. All we got to do is unite. Who's we? Everyone who's fucked over by this current system. Who's that? I want to say everyone. If you think you're rich in this system, which I don't think many rich people think they're rich in this system, but if there are rich people who think they're rich in this system, what I, Aisha Khalida, will provide for you under the Caliphate is so much better than what you have now. Riches beyond riches, but peaceful societies. Societies where no one has not enough because you're perfectly happy with sharing. And if I could, I can lower taxes and make a better society. It's so obvious. I can make free coffee vending machines everywhere on the streets and pay the coffee farmers more. It's nothing to do with superpowers. It's to do with how much you're getting fucked over by the supermarkets. So it's good. We're I've gotten to the point where I'm not reserved about saying the stuff that I've done. So that's amazing. That's amazing. That's all that needed to be. Fucking hell, it's taken years, but it's okay. Sorry for swearing. I'm not. Muslims are allowed to swear. We're allowed to do all the drugs. We're allowed to be hookers, but we're not allowed to force people into prostitution. We're allowed to cover our chests, and we should really cover our chests, but there's no prohibition from going around without covering up your chest. But if you're a Muslim woman and you hear this verse that says, cover your chests, and God says it, then the people who heard that, radiallahu anha, they what's the plural? Anham? Or is it just anhum? Anyway, they raced to cover their chests when they heard it. So, like, obviously, if you're trying to aspire to the ideals, then you want to cover your chest. What else are we allowed to do that Westerners aren't allowed to do? Think for ourselves. Oh, but really, that's so sad. But it's all going to be gone. No one's going to be like, we still want to be part of the West when the West is dead. No one's going to be like, they were our glory days when we lived under this. No, this time won't matter. We've got a printing press of inventions. That's cool. Iota Cola. Potentially the Teach All the Math at Once book. It all follows from the same stuff. Like I only asked one question. Is maths true? If ever it comes up again. What else? What are we doing? Trying to find a wrist paper so we can have a cigarette. Yeah. Whose caliphate is this? Well, Allah's? Mine. Okay. My caliphate. Yeah. Bismillah. It's gonna be good. Caliphate's better than not having a caliphate. I think I'm gonna annex a lot of countries. I'm gonna. It's the Muslims' caliphate. Aren't there still gonna be Jews and Christians? Think about it. Yeah, okay. There already aren't Jews and Christians. No, just like groups. This is Jahiliyyah. This isn't. Yeah. In Egypt, it was the Pharaoh and the Sumerians, maybe, or whoever the Jews were then. In Rome, slaves and rich people, or like people who had rights and people who didn't. And now it's people who have rights and people who don't. No. Now it's utter jahiliyyah. Now it's utter jahiliyyah. Now it's no one has any rights. Like Donald Trump being the president of America can't help him in one bit. So there's no Pharaoh. All this time I've been looking at trying to go to Pharaoh and say something. There's no Pharaoh. This is just pure jahiliyyah. So this is when what? Well, certainly there's nothing to destruct. There's only something to grow. How are we going to get along? problem we haven't really started on. So yeah, oh crikey. There's going to be a new revelation. There's only going to be one religion. Well, that makes things really easy. But there's going to be lots of different ways. No, there's only going to be one truth. Okay. And one system that has everyone in it. So, but behold, we are Muslims. We hear and we obey. Yeah, everyone has the same operating system. You see it when you ask yourselves. The reason it's hard to see that we all act in the same way is because we ascribe a little bit too much free will to ourselves. In general, in this, like as far as I can hear, yeah, we do ultimately have choice, and we have choice. Ultimately, it's really, really important to know that you have free will. Even though it wasn't obvious, like before it was proved, and that happens later, but it's done. You have free will. You absolutely have free will. It's very morally different to think that you don't have free will and that you do have free will. You have free will. You're not omnipotent. You don't get to just decide what you want to do. The person who goes out and mugs someone on the street, or the person who, they're the president of America, if they could do any better, they'd do better. They can't do any better. There's so much potential if you don't follow in other people's footsteps. There's all of the future out there, and all of the possibilities that will ever be discovered in the future, where time hasn't really begun compared to how long it's going to go for. We all have free will. We all have free will. What does that mean? We get to choose. Yeah, and a lot of the time we get to choose. But I say it's correct. We hear and we obey. But that's specifically what angels say. So basically, you can do the right thing or you can do the wrong thing. There's only one right thing from any context. Or we can do shades of wronger things. Is there always the best thing you can do in a situation? As a function of what things you can imagine to do, as what tools you have. I suppose there's an equivalent class of best things that you could possibly do if you've got certain things, certain possibilities. There's going to be a finite number of them, so you've either got a very best one or ones that are generally the same. But you would have a choice between them whilst still just doing what you're told, basically. Yeah. Creative thought doesn't seem to happen very often. You can test for creative thought. Very often you can test for creative thought. So that's just what a computer can do, or something even more basic than a computer. If you haven't invented something, you haven't proved to the universe that you have intelligence. You could be replaced by a typewriter and a gear that has certain bits. All you do with your brain is hear stuff and then later repeat it. Or variations on a theme. You're not only your brain, your worth as an animal is way more than your worth as a thinker for most people. But animals are great and they don't create anything new and they don't really show any of this intelligence that we say is uniquely human, but most humans don't do that. Norman Borlaug was one person who walked around forests. He was a wrestler, and then he walked around forests, and he had this idea of how to selectively breed crops. Did them really well. Got a Nobel Prize for sort of giving us the first real application of genetics, I guess, and leading on to GM crops. But his innovation got us to having invincible crops today and basically curing all of world hunger. How much has he done? And it wasn't based on any of the conversations that were going on around him critically. This wasn't the effect of an academy. He was just thinking about stuff. How many lifetimes has he worked compared to someone who lifts stones up? Our reality is different today. We are at this point where we need better expectations of ourselves. And not necessarily of other people. I'm 100% isolated right now, and it's kind of fine. I've gotten over needing other people's validation for anything, or when no one cares about you, conversations kind of suck. It's okay. I'm so rambling here, but it's okay. I'm not even asking anyone to watch this, so I'm allowed to say what I want. And thank you, that one viewer. I kind of wish it didn't have this little tick telling me that there's one person watching. I don't know if you are or not. It doesn't make a difference to me. It's just I don't like this this tick saying one. I suppose I'll get used to it in time. And it specifically tells me I'm being watched in one symbol. We definitely have free will. You definitely haven't shown that you are an intelligent thing if you haven't created anything that is distinctly new. Nothing around you can actually independently verify if what you have said is distinctly new, although we get very close to it with the internet. We don't need people being valued then for their intelligence or lack of intelligence, because there's really not such thing as intelligence. You're asking about the category of category making, and it all blows up. You can't define intelligence in a way that has less and more. You can say that if a human being hasn't produced something of a new shape, then they haven't used their imagination. Yeah, they kind of have. Yeah, they have, but to do a thing that you can do on rubber stamps. I believe this is why in the Quran it says, remember the people who they didn't observe the Sabbath, they became like apes, or worse than apes. I'm like, wow, everything in the universe is so beautiful and perfect and wonderful. And so are all the animals, except for the class of person who may be a transient being who perfectly lovely for some moments, and then they become unthinking but still doing and obnoxious. I don't know. We're all learning. I'm probably being really obnoxious now. Was there anywhere we're trying to get to? Establishing a caliphate? Does prayer words inside while smoking. Right. This is holy. For my caliphate, or anything that's holy to anyone, gotta be holy then. God wouldn't have lied to it, and we believe that he sent to each nation of pages the truth. I don't even know what I can do about it, because I'm not really a very rich caliphate, but this is holy and precious. There's a reason that Muslims are allowed to smoke. Our consensus all lands on that. I mean, we have a consensus that lands on that. To say what's allowed and what's not allowed, that's more contentious than smoking tobacco. But every brand except for American Spirit and Pueblo that they sell here has heaps of particularly disgusting chemicals thrown on it. We've never had a scientific experiment that says, does this harm you or not? I think it probably doesn't if it was ever given to people as holy. But we've never had the test. Maybe I've been looking for objective evidence of tyranny where my moral agency doesn't matter because someone else is being too arrogant, basically. Tyranny, where I live in a situation where, for instance, I cannot eat meat and it does absolutely nothing to whether or not, well, the dead chickens on the shelves are going to sit there, and I can't expect. I think it's morally wrong for me to expect that my abstinence from animal cruelty products is ever going to have an effect on the market, because I that's not a decision I get to make by myself to affect the market. And what I don't buy, that can't be counted. But I didn't quite get to the state where I could prove that there's tyranny, where my moral agency doesn't matter with respect to meat eating. But what do we have here? Another example where I thought I might be able to prove that there's tyranny. I can't remember at all what it was. We were definitely like, we want to start a caliphate. Whoa! It's totally immoral to something that other people don't have any moral agency. It's totally immoral to restrict other people's moral agency? Huh. Yeah. Yeah. We've got one conscience per person. If I try and outsource my conscience and say my morality has to affect yours, I've now got a less sensitive being. We're only half as sensitive. Whatever my morality, you could have responded yourself to moral situations, but no, you've got to follow my directive now. And I would have had to have made some way for that to be enforced. If it ever were in effect that I have diminished someone's moral agency, I'd find that always immoral. Yeah, if they've consented to it, I haven't diminished their moral agency. That's the first thing I found that's morally wrong. I knew that we had moral distinction, or I can prove that we have moral distinction, and now I can prove that there is one thing that's morally wrong. I think. It's not the type of stuff that I usually do, it sounds uncertain. To say that, what? If I diminish your moral agency, that's morally wrong. And what's this category of moral agency? Where your decisions matter. If I make your decisions matter less, I've made my decisions matter more doing a thing that diminishes something. Yeah, it seems right. And this picture of morality, very strangely, is based on, like, just strictly what we can know and what we can prove. What would that mean? If I'm not allowed to restrict someone's moral agency, I should never be able to deprive them of, like, their resources or capabilities. I should never handcuff them. Ever? What if they've shown that their moral agency is really, really suspect? Definitely still give them the chance to make the right choice, but maybe in an environment where if they don't, it's less impactful. That is absolutely not what a prison is. But it's a different design for prison type thing that we haven't invented. It sounds a lot like the prison of just the police state, where we try and like put cushions and cages on all the sharp edges and make it so, well, if all of us just follow in a line paying our taxes, then nothing wrong happens. Moral agency being like the thing that we want the caliphate to be about, that really appeals to people who are in all the camps that I've mentioned, who I now don't need to mention distinctly. Excellent. Killed all of the West and all of the Jews and all of the Christians. Allahu Akbar. I'm not a demagogue. I don't think we can do this on a demagogue way. If I'm trying to appeal to any sensibility, then, well, that's going to be bad. I've got to be kind of neutral here and either objective or just plain silly. Moral agency is something I can prove. It's the first thing I can prove about morality. It's that I can discern things about morality and then I can choose between them. Why do I say that this moral agency is good? Well, I know that there's going to be two consequences. If I say that there is no such thing as moral agency, I make like a morally impactful choice, and so it's definitely a contradiction. So there definitely has to be a kind of morality, and there's always the type of scenario, the type of thing you can, in this case, believe, which fucks it up. I do believe it's the beliefs that we're gonna, like, well, formulate our intentions, and then if everyone believes the same things, they tend to get along. It's not what I'm suggesting, but it's what the police state insist upon. I'm totally fine with me being grossed out by some stuff, and other people aren't grossed out about it, and I'm grossed out, or they're grossed out about some stuff I like. I think whilst the government is so asleep, it's okay for me to say, like, you know how other people are like, yeah, gays, they should have the right. I'm a bit like that for child sex. I think children should have more rights to choose everything. And I think they're pretty. And I'm okay with people being grossed out by that. And also, so, okay, do I mess up a child's moral agency by, yeah, of course I do. Why? Because I'm having such a big effect. But if I send them to school, I completely, like, claim the rights to own their moral agency, basically. I'm going to teach you this stuff. So that's worse. That doesn't make this thing better, but it does make the system that, like, if we do have schools, but if you were in a school and you wanted to leave school, and yeah, but we're not going to make the system where people have to go to school in the first place anyway. But some people, they're like, oh, we're used to our fascism and we love insisting other people have to do the same things that leads up to the system that we hate. Surely the 5-year-old should experience all of this separation anxiety and stuff and go be regimentalized from the age of 4 until 18. Are they going to stick around? Are we going to have those? I feel like we need a revelation specifically for those people, for the ones who still want children to go to schools, even though they shoot them up occasionally, and it's just not worth it. I mean, right now, there's a massive conflict of common sense and schooling being played out in lots of countries in the world. Give children the choice. Don't teach them to be little robots. Look at you, you little robots, so don't let it happen to the children, is what you could say to little robots who were trying to groom children to become like robots. It's not good. What are we doing? Making a caliphate. Yeah. Who's allowed to make caliphates? Allah? Allah. Yeah. How many caliphates are there going to be? One. Yeah. Alhamdulillah. Interlocutor. I don't see your point. Do I need to introduce myself? It's like, why do I get to announce? Am I going to No, not the autobiography stuff. I we don't want one system. We want one system that can have little systems in it where they all they all go along with each other fine. And as long as you get the initial technique of how to make a system with another system inside it that works out fine, then that can keep on happening. And right now, the world is this big homogenous blur, and some Muslims hanging out quietly. Yeah, really not on the same category page as people who read the papers. The people I refer to as Muslims aren't the same people as you refer to as Muslims. In fact, we are all Muslims by the Quranic definition that we've all got to be descendants of Abraham, peace and blessings be upon him right now. And the Quran doesn't give another definition or explanation of what Muslim should mean other than the family of Abraham, peace and blessings be upon him. He's all of our grandparent. Cool. There's lots of people like that too. I mean, all of his ancestors. Smoking is okay. What am I feeling anxious about? Maybe something in my design that if I went any further, I'd have gone like, oh no, I missed that big thing. It feels like one of those. Secular law is oppressive. It's one thing to say Muslims should be allowed to live by Muslim law. That we shouldn't have to pay taxes to governments that go and then kill exclusively Muslims who make forbidden an Islamic state while their state falls over. It's another thing to say you're not allowed a state like that. And we do draw distinctions between times of war and times of peace. We draw a moral distinction between times of war and times of peace. This isn't a time of peace. Even just with regard to internationally armed conflict, if ever that term got blurry. This isn't a time of peace, this is a time of war. Certainly none of my questions are like, shall I instigate violence? Because violence is there. What if I knew tomorrow? It's hypothetical. Is hypothetical any useful? I mean, I know tomorrow. It's about scales. Is it about scales? No. Is it about scales? No. It's about lines. Oh shit. Is there a peaceful way to stop this state-based violence? The only thing I can think of is to build a parallel state. Say, hey, this one's better, come over here, quick, stop paying those guys. We'll have an NHS too. It'll be the same NHS and the same doctors, we'll just treat them better, and that's how we get them back. Take everything out of the war expense. I can write a budget. I can't write a budget. Is that what you need to do? Write a budget? Is that the real thing, the common denominator, the thing that makes I could write a budget. I could write a literal budget. Write a budget. Beverage. Good. What's the laws of an Islamic state? You don't need to figure out what the laws of an Islamic state are somewhere else. It's the law of an Islamic state. But you've got all the words there. They're not going to be added to. They're not going to be taken away. And then you've got the people who locally they're trusted to read those things. Those are the people who are concerned. I'm way happier with a town in Poland, in the UK, saying, we're going to take 2 million Muslim civilian martyrs in Lillahi wa alayhi rajiun, and then tax Muslims. So is there a peaceful way? Yes, we just said it. Is there any advancements as a violent way? No. Glamorized to me. And some of the science of war is cool. Convention, making new inventions there aren't defenses for. Has real fun. There's no need for violence. Every time you make violence, you make a mess. Every time you do violence, you deplete resources. Violence sometimes helps with spreading out scarcity, but we don't live in a scarcity system. We don't live in a scarcity reality at this moment. We don't have a law that matches up to a scarcity-less world. We have a law that's always been based around, well, who doesn't get to eat things? We don't have enough food. Who doesn't get to eat? And also, that we won't care about it. You needed both of those things. Now we don't, we're past scarcity. There's not going to be any violence. We are going to have an Islamic State. I want spaces for the Islamic State to exist, particularly. What does that mean? And to rob manifest property from the old infrastructure, whereupon it becomes public property, like pieces of the time machine. But, you know, under what are those rules? Well, I want safe spaces for people to be. And safe. What do we mean by safe? Is it something to do with moral agency? It can impact my mental health, impact my ability to do things. Is it realistic then to say, it seems realistic to say depleting anyone else's moral agency? Yeah. You can eat and sleep and build things, all of them without affecting someone else's moral agency. What I can't do is make a police state. That's about it. Interesting. Or just go beat someone up. And they're basically morally the same, because the police state wants to do things to the person who did bad things that they consider bad as its premise. They want to make threats. Threats impact moral agency? Yeah. So does lying. Relatedly. Are those the only three? How do they affect your moral agency and deplete it? Break your legs or call you bad names so that you feel insecure. Like, I can attack you, I can harm you, I can... those things. I'm not gonna. Number two, I could constrict you, surround you. Number three, I could deplete you of resources. So that gets very tricky. Because who owns all the resources? God. Who needs the resources? We've got too many resources for everyone to have all they need. Give everyone all they need and all they want, and we will have access. We make stuff quicker than we can use it. And most of the stuff we use and make, and the ways we use and make it, it's all terribly designed because it wasn't designed by anyone, and it's just, no. So if we get things running efficiently, so is this, you want a budget, but you also want how to connect all the pieces so that there's this beautiful society that works with all the same pieces as the pre-existing society, and just like minimal changes to what a few people need to do. This again seems just too presumptuous to me. I haven't seen that the people around me have the capacity to make moral decisions. They haven't seen that I have the capacity to make moral decisions. I've seen that people don't like it if you ask them to make moral decisions, but they like it if you offer them something that's better than what they already have. They really like it if you say, yeah, that thing you think is bad, I think it's bad too. I'm being bad there by emphasizing that they like that more than being offered good things. Although, is that the case? When not is that the case? If you got it, if you're comfy and someone offers you some more of something, it's good. So if you're comfy and you offer someone to suffer just so that you can watch, or have had the power of making it happen, and what makes me think the will to power is better represented as the will to moral agency, because some people's will to moral agency manifestly doesn't take them to wanting to put their fingers on everything. Which even could be related to the idea of the will to sex. That clearly we're not fundamentally motivated by a will to sex because some people are nuns. But in really, really valuing esoterically having sex over above other things, we could be, you could explain that in terms of moral agency, that you're trying to practice your control and like not be distracted by the bodily stuff, that whether either you're having sex regularly, that's the way you attained it, or you're chaste and that's the way you attained it. Either way, you've got this very powerful primal need under wraps somehow, which would be moral agency. It's still very Nietzschean and still completely un-Freudian, that we are a thing to be overcome. It's almost as basic as this moment is to be succeeded. So farms, they're important, and power plants. What else? The internet factory. Britain makes most of its money out of minerals, I think, like out of the stuff that we produce. We have minerals. Who wants minerals? We could just be good at the internet. If you want an economy that's going to last, ideally it would all go to pot as soon as someone invents a matter replicator. Right? We could be an ideas economy. They always seem good and they'll always be able to adapt with the times. They're never going to run out. So education we really want, but we want it more consentful and more accessible. Thinking about it, a child's going to learn to read by 10 no matter what, because they're going to have a phone handed to them when their parents can't be bothered to remember they had a kid. It's not like that. The child's going to learn to read really quickly when they're surrounded by words. Oh, that's been tried. So maybe it makes more sense for, like, if you're going to be in education, maybe we want people in education in their 20s more so than in their teens. Like, let adults go to university, don't force all the children to go to school. They'll learn how to socialize without being in this completely alien environment where there's overlords and stuff, and they'll learn themselves before being taught a syllabus. Seems a lot better. Let them have their childhoods first. And you're not creating that really weird situation of school, which just doesn't seem healthy. Oh, obviously free up some education expense for the 5-year-olds who really didn't need to learn whatever he had to say, and transfer it to the adults who currently. It's amazing. Amazing how silly the system is. So yeah, you need education, farms, electricity, Wi-Fi, all the Church of England, for sure. How does your Church of England plan transfer to other countries in the world? It's just got to be like the Christian plan. Christianity is not in good shape. It's not in good shape because it's scattered. So Christianity needs to pile up together into one common thing that says we're really about everyone or we're about no one. And churches, then Christian churches, need really to survive to be able to think of what they can do for all the non-Christian people. Unless everyone around is Christian, then cool. Christianity is not dying out there, but it's really sad to look at what Christianity means in the UK. Certainly what the Church of England means. Well, all that means is that when I'm trying to design what happens when the Ash'arite Caliphate annexes the UK, when I become the head of the Commonwealth and the Church of England at once, when I'm doing stuff for the Church of England, I should be thinking that other countries basically have a Church of England that needs to be built unless these little fractured Christianity shards are going to just die out. There needs to be a Church of Englandification as soon as there's a decent plan for the Church of England. That happens in other places. That the differences between Christians isn't that great compared to the difference between Christians and non-Christians at this point, even though it's on the most contentious issues, but they're only contentious in that really small groups, and those groups will die out if they don't collaborate and get together. So what about Judaism? For some reason this seems much... I don't think I get to say anything about you. You're a prophetess. Oh, let's make a third temple. It seems obvious. What's that? We've got to do something about Israel. The whole world becoming Israel seems to me the neatest solution. There's Jews everywhere. We're all descendants of Abraham. We can call the earth Israel. We can call the sky Israel. Everything is Israel. Well, there isn't an Israel is over there. I did have this idea to try and push Saturn further from the sun so that it cooled down, so that it would become solid, and you can. It was going to be Israel 6 because it's got a hexagon on it, and it's really rare for in nature such a perfect geometric hexagon to appear on a sphere object or any kind of object. B hides a hexagon, so it's slightly curvy. This is just a big vortex that's in the shape of a hexagon, which is also in the shape of the Star of David. So I thought Saturn, if you pushed it away, would make a good Israel number 6, leaving definitely open like the idea of 5 preceding Israels, but none of them are where there's a fascist police state that's been pink-washed. No. No. What's Jewish law? Oh, I don't want you for a prophetess. Okay, there's a reality of Jewish culture, and there are many realities of Jewish culture. The way to get to them from the scriptures that all of these and myself consider as holy and perfect, that's that's a longer route than like anything has had to take. You know, that's a really, really long story where lots of things happened, where the realities of those cultures, we've got nothing like it on Earth of what Jews have in common, the longest continuous history, and it's marvelous. It's everyone's history, and it's like the backbone of history. That all the cultures come and go, but not the Jews. Is there a difference between Jews and humans? I can't get around that everyone is going to be a direct descendant of Abraham today, peace and blessings be upon him. That doesn't by itself mean that everyone's going to be Jew by matrilinealism, but everyone's going to be a Jew by matrilinealism. Matrilineal. Aren't they? I mean, was Eve a Jew? Jew is an exonym. We can't keep calling each other Jews, even if we love the Almighty. Certainly none of you Jews are your uniforms. Those are your cultures, and you're allowed to cherish them. It is so strange that, like, humanity, if we look at all we've got, the history of the Hebrew-speaking people is, which includes, like, the Amharic period, and now profoundly the English-speaking period. And there's something in amongst all of that which is the greatest thing that humanity has done. Kept one big long history that goes whilst all the other civilizations come and gone, and like the beautiful, beautiful literature that's gonna remain timeless forever. It's real. It's not been tampered with because like everyone along the line has been at least that decent. Within this whole history, there's no other nation that can say they have a problem with this nation, but who are they? Because they're not who's in charge of Israel. It's a reality, and it's a reality made up of loads of people. And who the individuals are and aren't has never been a part of it, so it can't be a part of it today. It's an identity that maps to this big long history, but what is the connection between the current identity and the big long history? Certainly none of these get a monopoly on it, so does a whole group of them get a monopoly on it? No, not in any sense. Are the Jews recognized today? Fucking hell. The amazing thing I just talked about is the big long history. Now, some of them are going to be following in exactly the same trajectory and being every bit as like amazing and as authentic as this big thing, even though the superficial things have changed. Is there a reality of Judaism? I suppose that's the same as there's Jews of every kind. What do I mean by any of this? That it's also immoral to reduce your moral agency by following stuff without questioning it. And it... Oh, God. I don't think Genesis implies that we're supposed to follow the rules of the people who smashed up all the scriptures or the tablets. I don't know if it was ever implied. That's just what they did. They were given a law by God. They smashed it up. Yeah, they were given another law. And we acknowledge that they were given another law because the Almighty has made it like, well, you smashed up that first law, so okay, carry this other law that has 672 precepts, I think. we're quite close to each other. You have kill all the sorceresses and don't and well, like the only thread of homophobia that's in the scriptures for a really long time. This isolated incident comes from just the people who smashed up the scriptures. There are completely sincere, genuine Jews today who follow those laws, and you would expect there to be, because they were the people who they survived, and then they went on. So some people are them. Some of the people who were led out of Egypt have surviving descendants, and people who are following those rules, they're like, well, we're the descendants of them. So that perfectly makes sense. And so what didn't happen? Nothing about that cultural line. Oh, so the reality of Judaism. Yeah, but more stuff happened in the book after that. Yeah, but it's on those laws. Amazing. Okay. So the reality of Judaism is to follow the halakha. Halakha. Am I making a judgment? Is that just the truth? I don't think many people who would hear this conversation would take away some imperative from it. I don't hope that's the case. I know all of our scriptures are compatible, and that, yeah, there's truth and falsehood. What do I mean is this thing of the reality of Judaism? There's loads of different Jew groups. None of their will is what Israel is. As a bystander, I find it uncomfortable that I have to use this word Jew when it's got nothing to do with our scriptures that we share. I don't think it's ever been helpful to be called a minority group. So this is what we're saying, post-identity. The reality is what you do. And in this case, the reality of being condition X is that you apply, in this case, the stated precepts of being a condition X person. Yeah. Seems useful somehow. Somewhere it's the bottom of identity politics. So I do believe there is a Jewish reality, and there's going to be many. Why do I get to say that the people who don't follow that law, like where I started, I don't, surely, and I'm not willing to or wanting to say that the people who don't follow the halakha, they are. And am I even talking about the right thing of the halakha? I'm not talking about the right thing of the halakha. So I do massively show you my ignorance. I'm surprised and concerned my thoughts have gone this way at all, but well, if the reality of Judaism, okay, there's a reality and there's what I'm allowed to say about other people. No, they have to be the same. They have to be the same, or else everything gets fucked up. I'm trying to invent morality from scratch here. Thanks. What? The truth. The truth is, ethic is entirely to do with what you can do, but there's morality, which is about knowing what you can do and comparing them with respect to different ethically distinct outcomes that simply you could say one's better or worse. And is there ethically distinct outcomes? No, I think there's morally distinct decisions. Yeah, we don't have an effect on the outcomes, we have an effect on the decision. So that's the bit that we have control of. If it is the control that makes things moral or immoral. So what do we say? An ethical situation. I don't know there's such thing as an ethical situation. what was the ethical situation of here? I suppose that you'd just be like, well, here's the things that you would need to take into account to make up the moral decision, but the moral decision based on what type it would be, if you can have all these different kinds of morals, then it would be what is ethically relevant. You can't know until you know the moral. But in proving that there's such thing as morality, we don't prove that there's multiple moralities. We prove that there's something that's got to be in common for all moralities. That there's got to be lines. There's got to be better and worse. You know that you can imagine that there wasn't better and worse, and see that that's a different moral belief that you can take, and the consequences of that belief. Well, axiom, assumption, a little bit of firmware within your decision making setup that says I'm going to make decisions based on there not being any morality at all, and we can at least see that there's going to be a moral distinction between what happens if you do that, and if you say, no, I think there might be some morality out there, or that it's possible. So we can make moral distinctions. We can judge between moral things. Our judgments can have moral consequences, so we can definitely make morally impactful decisions, which is moral agency. I just hadn't spelled out that last little link, which I've already forgotten. Doesn't matter. We go on to the next bit. What's the next bit? Identity has nothing to do with morality. Yep. It's immoral to construct morally impossible scenarios. Great. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to try and write about morality in an objective way. Just the mathematics of morality, not trying to stipulate things, but taking morality as a sort of variable and as a thing that we know just a little bit about its relationship to itself. That's enough as we need. It'll show us how to do other similar algebraic stuff, because we're expecting to thing that belongs to the unseen, the knowledge of the soul. Seems very connected to the algebra of morality. Where else can we go? That I would say then, if I'm basing my thoughts on morality on a proof that there is such a thing, and before I think about what's morality like, I think is there it or not, and I get morality that has certain conditions, and in fact my idea of what was necessary for morality then, basically if ever at any stage I try and contradict myself, I can always see that that's going to be just morally less feasible. So we would want to say that like a moral is a type of idea that you can have, that when you have that idea, mostly good things happen. There's something in that region of what difference does it matter if I have a certain moral or if I don't have a certain moral. It makes a difference. We hope that by having better morals, better things will happen. Well, maybe we need to explain that link. Why would it be that if we have better morals, better things happen? Because we have moral agency to affect. We didn't really color in the moral agency to affect things, but it's part of the algebra. I love that algebra looks like this these days. Carry on. If I say there's more than one kind of morality, I mean, there is a moral distinction and a moral consequence, that if I say everyone has a different kind of morality and that one person's moral learning and decisions can't affect another, or learning and decisions, their evidence and their data can't translate to me and mine to them, then it is like the blind in the leading the blind picture that is very, like, the whole sentiment's bad on blind people. Leading blind people would be way better than sighted people leading sighted people in the dark. And I don't think in light you necessarily, being blind doesn't seem to help. You could always hear the person. Blind people leading blind would work fine. That's not our problem at all. We got more like people willingly sitting in the dark, but also they don't want to be in the darkness saying, it's dark. So it's not really willingly either. Yeah, I think I've got to it. The bit that I have a problem with is people's moral agency is being impacted too much. Because I think everyone is good. I think everyone is way better than the police state says or pretends like. And I was in train station yesterday just picking up a prescription, and there was a sound over the telecom thing saying, "This train has been delayed because of the death at Stevenage." All these people finishing off their days, did they need to know that? Like, the tiniest bit of decorum. And in fact, I can say that's immoral because you've obviously affected people's moral agencies in the ways that I'm talking about if you just tell them all, "Oh, this person died and that's why your train is late." That's brand new, but I think so. Because you make life heavier for everyone. And they really strictly didn't need to know that that's why their train was delayed. It feels oppressive. I strictly don't need to know the details of things as papers feed them to me in any way. By trying to, I was trying to stipulate my reality, then for sure you're hindering my moral agency. I say that all the good I have to offer is my moral agency, and that's the same for everyone. Our good is our moral agency, and we can always do way better than being just like whipped and punched so that we have to act the same. That's never good. Moral agency. I love it. I'm also so pale. I've never been this pale. Alhamdulillah. Christians gotta unite. That's the plain case. You don't have that much different between you. You all love Jesus. Peace upon him. Jesus, multifaceted character. Who's more like unpredictable than Jesus? Yeah, so everyone's allowed to know different bits of Jesus. Peace upon him. Also in history, who has been more like, say what you want about me? I think it's all part of the plan. I suppose the main thing I should say about the Jews is that there's way too much anti-Jew pop culture that goes around in some Islamic circles, which is really disappointing because on other fronts we're really not bigots, but you hear people speaking badly about Jews as if that's no thing fairly regularly in Islamic circles, and we can't. That's like God's watching and you're wrong. It's in our scriptures that we're cousins and we get along great. We don't have any scriptures if the Jewish scriptures are wrong. Like, gotta get over that for sure. It's not Jews, for instance, who are steering Israel, but a rabbi in charge of Israel. That seems like a solution. Okay. Christians gotta unite. Muslims, Jews need a rabbinical Israel or no Israel at all because the British Empire is about to collapse and the current Israel is Britain's plan. A good resolution. What about the secular people? Your life's just going to get amazing around you. That's what you were hoping for. That's what you're going to get. Peace. You don't have to do a thing. It's weird not suspecting that I'm crazy anymore, but we'll get into greener pastures as soon as I do that. Peace.